And we are recording on Sunday, August 10th, 2025 at 8:25 a.m. Eastern Time. Probably one of the earliest show I've done in a while with Mr. Kenneth Abramowitz. You've been on here once before, episode 1439, and this is episode 1807. So it's sometimes I feel like a guest just came on and then I look at it, I'm like, that was like 350 episodes ago. So you've been on here once before. We talked about your book, The Multi-Front War, about America's the primary big three, radical Islam, China, and Russia, anything from pandemics to nuclear weapons and so forth. And I remember when we first got into it last time, you had said you had started with like healthcare analysis, and that sort of bled over into really analysis of, in a way, I guess you could say it's the healthcare of the United States. And as I just told you beforehand, I do gotta do my little plug. Guys, if you're listening to the show, please go in the description. Please go grab this energy drink, 242 Cola. It actually does taste good, and I'm not a carbonation guy. But if you like my show and you like that it's free, please go in the description and grab one. Um, but when we talked about it, it sounded sort of like it just bled over from healthcare analysis to a much larger system, a system of systems, the national security analysis of this country. And it's sort of a fascinating jump. I've had other fascinating jumps. I've had guests that went from international banking to special forces at 50. That's always fascinating to me when there's seemingly such a wide gap that people leap over. So I'm going to quit my meandering. Mr. Abramowitz, please introduce yourself for the people who don't know you, and then we can just jump into it.
Okay, thank you very much. It's great to be with you again.
Thank you.
The I spent my as you mentioned, I spent my whole life as an analyst, 45 years analyzing the healthcare system on Wall Street brokerage firms, Sanford Bernstein, now called Alliance Bernstein. And on 9/11, when I and everyone else was shocked at watching the Twin Towers fall, I said to myself, well, I'm an analyst. The only thing I know how to do is analyze. Maybe I should take some of my personal time, let's say one day a week. I work 6 days a week. I'll take one day a week and analyze 9/11. Who did it? Why did they do it? Why didn't we stop them from doing it? And that embarked me on a simultaneous, now 25-year career of public service, teaching myself national security for 10 years after 9/11. And then I started writing. I wrote one-page pieces, then two duplex, 2 pages. Then I started writing 4-page articles about 10 years ago. Then I wrote a book 5 years ago called The Multi-Front War. And I subsequently updated it 4 times. And I just produced the 4th edition about a month ago on Amazon, Barnes& and Noble, and other internet sites.
For everybody listening, the link to that book is in the description. Sorry, keep going.
And those of you who get it, just go to the last chapter because the last chapter is new. The rest of the book was the same book, but I added a new chapter on 2025, 2026 of a whole bunch of forecasts of basically how to get us out of the mess that we're in. And I write an article every 2 weeks for my website, savethewest.com. I give about 100 speeches or presentations a year. And I now spend 3 days a week, half my time on national security analysis and 3 days a week on healthcare analysis and investment. So I do the two simultaneously. And it's a lot of work, and I'm very happy with both of my simultaneous careers.
This is a kind of abstractly, regardless of them. Do you like that sort of, I don't know, multi-aspect? Like for me, I do the podcast. Every day I listen to an hour of an audiobook. Do you enjoy the sort of, I guess, I don't know, mental acrobatics of having to juggle both those?
Well, yes. Healthcare is 20% of the GDP. National security is 100% of the GDP.
Fair.
So I enjoy going back and I enjoy the subject matter of both. So I enjoy going back and forth between healthcare analysis and national security analysis, and I'm basically a professional student, and I just teach myself. I teach myself healthcare as a profession, and I teach myself national security as a public service. So I'm very happy with both careers.
No, I don't know anything about the healthcare industry. I do have a biology degree, but even that was 12 years ago. In terms of that, though, if I could imagine, there's a good chance I'm 100% wrong, but as an armchair healthcare analysis analyst, I would assume that it's different for obviously different age people. I'm 35, and it would be, whatever X, Y, and Z. And you might, I might have everything buttoned up. It's okay. I don't drink. I don't smoke. I don't do drugs. Like, okay, 35. Yeah. Other than a freak accident, you're probably fine. I would imagine as you get up 60, 70, 80, 90, that dynamic completely changes. And what was a concern before is either added onto or it's just tossed out entirely. Like, you're not too concerned about fertility at, say, age 95, but you are concerned about other things. Do you see that at all in the because everything that we last talked about, Islam, China, Russia, even pandemics, even COVID, it's still that it's kind of slowly but surely it's fading, and then there's the new thing, and it's the rate the weapons race for AI. Do you see that at all, where the what can be buttoned up, yet 35 doesn't apply as the country ages, as time goes on. Do you find that at all with new and I guess novel threats?
Well, there's one direct overlap between healthcare, between my two careers, healthcare and national security. And that is, I monitor 7 forms of warfare. Most people think war is kinetic. In other words, things blow up. Uh, Kinetic war is only one of them. Uh, I'm going to mention the other 6 right now, and you'll see one of them is healthcare. For example, um, chemical biological weapons. COVID as a biological weapon from China, uh, chemical, that would be fentanyl from China. Those two diseases, or one's a virus and one's just a chemical opioid, killed about 1 million Americans apiece. So, in the past 10 years, 1 million Americans died from COVID from China and 1 million from fentanyl from China. Well, I call that an act of war. It's not a coincidence. So that's the second form of warfare that I monitor, which directly impinges on my healthcare um, experience and expertise. Then the third form is cultural warfare. That's when you fight with words. And for example, we are cultural warriors. We don't have uniforms. We don't have bullets. We fight with our brains and our words. Number 4, you can fight with dollars, economics. Number 5, lawyers, lawfare. Number 6, demographics. And number 7, cyber. So I monitor these 7 forms of warfare, and I monitor 3 groups of enemies, which I call the reds, the greens, and the blues, color coded. Reds are the communists, China, Russia. Uh, Green are the Islamists. That would be Qatar and Iran, among others. And blues are the globalists, color coded blue for the United Nations,
Yeah, UN helmets.
right? For the UN helmets. And that's a UN World Economic Forum, drug cartels, and certain social media companies. So if you multiply 3 groups of bad guys by 7 forms of warfare, it comes out to 21 mini wars that we're fighting in World War III. So that was the thesis of my book. And in my book, I also describe how to how to win World War III, not just analyze World War III.
There was a book I read forever ago. I forget who it's by. Might have been Neil deGrasse Tyson. But it's talking about, so everything attracts everything else, gravity. So you have the Earth and Earth going around the sun, and then the moon's going around the Earth, and every planet that's surrounding the sun, and all of them have moons, and they're all tugging on each other. And I think he explained he was like with 2 bodies, you can roughly kind of calculate how they interact. Like when you take college physics, they tell you it's all wrong because nothing's ever perfect or in a vacuum. But there's always things like let's assume you're in a vacuum and let's assume there's no friction and whatever. Um, and he goes, with those loose assumptions, you can, if you know the equations, you can calculate how 2 bodies interact with each other. I don't think distance matters. I think distance from the cores matter, but it's mass and whatever. Because once you get to 3 and above, and there's a line in there, and he goes, it's something that only a supercomputer can know and love. Meaning it exponentially just gets so crazy about the moon of Saturn tugging on the moon of Mars, and at what point, and it kind of goes out the window for anyone who's, I imagine, not Stephen Hawking. Do you have that at all in 21 different wars? Do you, what is the met? Because for me, as somebody who failed pre-calculus 3 times in college, that goes out over my head so quickly. How do you, or is it just, do you make broad generalizations of these 4 fronts and these 9 fronts and these aren't involved with, whatever, these other 11 fronts? How do you balance all that or juggle all that? Or
Yeah.
do you at all?
Well, you just mentioned the word I was just about to mention, the word juggle.
Yeah,
So how to juggle, but pretend that we're in the circus or watching someone in the circus when we used to have circuses, and someone's juggling 3 balls, and you go, "Oh well, that's logical. I've seen people juggle 3 balls all the time," and then they try to juggle 4 or 5 balls, and you go, "Wow, I don't see too many people juggling 4 or 5." Well, I'm juggling 21 balls. But I'm juggling them intellectually rather than physically. And they're all interrelated with each other, which is why it's easier to do it than you think. The reason I mentioned that is there's some common characteristics to the reds, the greens, and the blues. For example, they're all dictatorships. They're all what I call top-down organizations, run by one person with a small group of people surrounding that one person. They all hate democracy. They all hate the rule of law. They hate the Constitution. They hate the Bill of Rights. They hate the Bible, both the Old and New Testament. They hate God. And they're collectively, I call them the pagans. When we read in history about pagans, it was like 3,000 biblical times, 3,000, 4,000 years ago. So one of the key theories of mine is that the reds, the greens, and the blues are just modern day pagans. I'm not really juggling 21 balls up in the air. I'm juggling 2 balls,
sure.
namely them democracies and dictatorships. And the world is roughly, of the 200 countries or so in the world, roughly half of them are democracies and half a dictatorship. And that struggle between democracy and dictatorship, now we're only juggling 2 balls up in the air. And the democracies generally believe in God, or let's just say a higher authority, or morality, or a conscience, however you want to describe it. And the dictatorships believe in none of that. They believe that the dictator is right, and you have to follow the will of the dictator, or else you have to be eliminated. And so I call, even though the Bible theoretically ended 2,000 years ago for the New Testament and 3,300 years ago for the Old Testament, I tell people that unofficially the Bible never ended. And just as our ancestors were fighting God versus the pagans, we're still fighting God versus the pagans. And nothing much has changed except the name of the pagans and where the pagans live. But the the fight is the fight between another using American term. The fight is a fight between life, liberty, and pursuit of happiness for everybody versus life, liberty, and pursuit of happiness for the dictator and his friends. And it's so I try to simplify the complexity of the situation so I can describe it like now, or in a book, or in an article.
That, yeah, I would imagine that does make it a lot. Yeah, I mean, yeah, the only thing change, obviously, yeah, the name where they are, and then the technology they use. Is it spears or is it missile? That's why it's. I think it was General Mattis said, if you have not read hundreds of history books, then you are geopolitically illiterate. Because it is true. I mean, I tried. I actually didn't enjoy it that, but I love Cold War history. But earlier this year or late last year, I read a book. Just, it was like, a 12-hour book, but it was just in general 10,000 BC to about the time of Christ. And it got boring really quick because I realized it was still all the same stories. No, it's no different than Vietnam or 9/11 or the Civil War. It's just the technologies changed, except because it was so ancient, the technologies didn't change. So it's just the same story again and again. You could start to predict it. So and so rises to power. The populace is disgruntled. He promises them this. They invade here. They do wars of expansion funded by blah. And then eventually gets too big, collapses under its own weight, and then, you know, just goes. So that does make it more simplistic in that you don't have to juggle 21 different things. It's probably more of just you take the circle and cut it in half and you go, it's this versus this.
By the way, it's not much more complicated than a Western movie or
Yeah.
Star Wars. Yeah, it's good versus evil.
Joseph
And
Campbell, Hero's Journey. It's Harry Potter. It's the same thing.
yeah,
Okay.
yeah. Now, one other thing that I use to help me learn about history fast is YouTube is full of historical people who create a 20, 30 minute um, YouTube about any war you can think about, and that saves me time rather than reading a 587-page book on the 30-year war in Europe. I can watch a 20, 30-minute YouTube and teach myself, not as an expert, but teach myself enough to understand good and evil and what happens.
Yeah, no, I would say, yeah, I would say YouTube is probably there is kind of no excuse not to learn. The amount of documentaries I've watched on there, the amount and what I use YouTube for is I'll do that. I'll watch a video, and if something really sticks with me, then I'll go find the 587 page book. I'll be like, that
Right.
was awesome. I got to know more about it. That's a good point. Yeah, otherwise you can just kind of throw most of it out the window. In terms of, I don't know, of the 21 things, do any of those I've ever expand? Do you go so instead of just a different arrangement of the existing pieces, do any of those expand into, I would imagine space supremacy, but I guess that could just be militarily and AI, but I guess that would be, yeah, cybernetically. Do you look at those as new novel, uh, I don't know, additions, or is it an extrapolation of the existing seven?
Yeah, well, there's two issues. One is the three bad guys, and one is the seven forms of warfare. Now, for the three bad guys, every bad guy you can think of falls into the category of red, green, or blue. In other words, communist or former communist, Islamist, and globalist. They're all authoritarian, they're all dictatorships, they're all illegitimate, they're one man shows. So you name me an enemy, I'll fit them into the category. Now, one thing that does happen is sometimes I meet someone, not meet them personally, but I meet them on YouTube or on the internet, and I say, "Oh, this politician's a red, a green, and a blue." He just gave a speech, and this paragraph was written by some communist staffer, and this one paragraph was written by an Islamist, and that chapter or paragraph by a globalist. So I do see a mixture of the three. Um, uh, uh, President Barack Obama would be an example of a red, a green, and a blue all mixed together. And so you don't have to just be color coded red or green or blue. Now, in terms of the seven fronts or types of wars, I used to have six. And then COVID and fentanyl became a big issue, and I realized, and friends, when I gave presentations, friends would say, "Oh, what about COVID or fentanyl?" And then I realized I had to add a seventh category, and that became the seventh category: chemical biological weapons. By the way, arson. Whenever I see a big fire somewhere, I say, "Oh, did someone light that? Was were they a terrorist? I mean, I don't know. I'm just watching on the internet." And so I put arson into the chemical biological weapons category of unconventional war. And so that's how I fit arson in rather than creating a whole distinct uh, element for arson. So I try to fit everything in. And the reason is I do not want to go past 21. Uh, in other words, that's enough complication to try to convey to people. And so that's why I try to fit everything into the seven forms of warfare, into the three types of bad guys.
Is there something would there be a new form that even if reluctantly, you would have to add in. Because I definitely get what you're saying, where it's like, yeah, I don't want to add more. I'd like to limit it and make it, as clean and concise as possible. But is there something where there's just a new addition that you can't ignore?
Take space. There's a President Trump a few years ago set up the Space Force.
Mhm.
Uh, all the bad guys and good guys are weaponizing space. We're working on lasers and other forms of energy to destroy each other's satellites. So, where does that fall in? Well, I would put it into the kinetic category because it's just it's a kinetic physical war. It just happens to be fought up there rather than down here. So that's why it doesn't just need a new category. Um, AI, the ability to use computers to create very fast decisions under pressure, like in the battlefield. Well, I put that in the kinetic. That goes into it's just a better, in quotes, better way to fight a war, or this huge growth in drones because of the Ukraine-Russia war, with both countries producing I don't know, 1 million a year or more of drones. And but again, that would fit in the kinetic war. But on the other hand, you have to shoot down the drones. So there's a lot of sophisticated cyber that's being used to undermine the ability of the drone to function so that it just like falls out of the sky. But that would go into the cyber category. So far, the innovations that have come along in the past 5 years fit within my original model.
Are there any are there any threats that aren't from a foreign power? Like, are there any threats where a natural disaster or, a radical shift in climate or asteroid or legitimate pandemics that just arise? Or do you still, regardless if foreign power or natural kind of doesn't matter, you still just view it as threat?
Well, a natural, like take the flood in Florida, I mean, Texas, a month or two ago, 100
Hmm.
people, huge tragedy. Never should have happened. I mean, the floods happen when floods feel like happening, but that was an example of mismanagement by the government, the local government, the county government, the state government. I read in the internet that they they knew at 1 o'clock in the morning that there was going to be an uncontrolled flood a few hours later. Well, do something. Hello. But that's just normal stuff. That's like telephone calls, internet. People are sleeping. Get loudspeakers, helicopters. Um, send in the National Guard. Mobilize every first responder you can. Knock on doors. So that's just a management issue. Um, so that's that's not a form of warfare. That was just incompetence, unfortunately. And and by the way, when things like that happen, they can never happen again. In other words, in a perfectly functioning country, the lessons of that should be diagnosed within 2 weeks and sent to every local official everywhere who's responsible for flooding or anything, so that never again do people die because the system didn't work fast enough. The But let me try to directly answer your question. The In World War I and II, the war was fought over there. There was a famous song, "Over There, Over There." That's World War I and II. We're now in what I call World War III, and the big difference in World War III is the Beatles song that I like to quote from about 40 years ago, which is "Here, There, and Everywhere." So I call World War III "Here, There, and Everywhere," because just because some bad guy is on the map in China or Iran doesn't mean the bad guy doesn't have agents operating right here in America, right in front of our eyes. For example, when I see a campus protest, and all of a sudden, mysteriously, on October 8th, one day after Hamas committed genocide against Israel, killed 1,200 people, took 250 hostages, would have killed all 10 million people in Israel if they could have gotten away with it. The next day, October 8th, everyone's accusing Israel of committing genocide. You go, what? October 7th was genocide against Israel. What are you talking about, October 8th? Well, that was organized, pre planned. By who? Well, since I don't have agents working for me, I have to just use educated guesses. So I'll get that Iranian agents, Qatari agents had pre-positioned their agents on the 200 campuses. They mysteriously had signs that all looked similar to each other. They mysteriously slept in tents that looked mysteriously similar to each other. So all this stuff was purchased beforehand, and all they did is have to turn the switch on. And all of a sudden, 200 campuses erupt with anger and emotion. And that's internal cultural war. But it didn't come from normal Americans. It came from foreign agents working for, let's just say, Iran and Qatar, who basically pay people, rent a protester, to show up with anger, criticizing Israel for having been the victim of genocide. You know, you can't make this stuff up. It's an inversion of reality. And the reds, the greens, and the blues are very good at inverting reality. So that's an internal war from our external enemies.
Yeah, and that's something that you just have to acknowledge is true of regardless of, let's say somebody listening to this show truly hates Israel or truly hates Iran or whatever. You do have to kind of look, you do have to remove emotion and look. I remember the day after Trump won in 2016, I remember being at my grandmother's house and like the first night after the election, it was just news coverage of all these protests in Chicago and New York and LA. And the first thing that I don't necessarily have to write off huge protests as foreign action or coordinated action, but when they all have the same signs, that's as somebody that did graphic design, I'm like, hey, what what is that? Maybe one dude is passionate and prints out 10, but they all have them all across the country. You just have to be very honest with yourself and go, does this look organic? Organic things do happen, absolutely. Not not like that. And in terms of here, there, everywhere, do you think that could evolve into or is a further continuation of mutually assured destruction instead of just thermonuclear weapons? Is it so everything they have from COVID to fentanyl to agents here? I would imagine we also have a fair number of agents, all across. I mean, we know that, from the Snowden leaks, if those are accurate, that we had, NSA agents in, foreign telecom company. And why wouldn't you? It's the right move tactically to already, you don't want to have to start embedding them once a war has begun. You want them there, deep cover. You want them there for 20, 30 years. Do you think that could evolve further into a form of mutual assured destruction where it's everybody has agents everywhere and it's just almost just crisscrossing and it's, just like a ball of yarn and you really can't pull one out?
Now, bear in mind, unlike baseball games, the bad guys don't wear jerseys. It's
Correct, correct.
red, green, blue,
But
and
neither would we.
yeah, okay, right. So now bear something in mind here. The You have to look at life from the good guy point of view and from the bad guy point of view. So let's look at war from the good guy point of view. The good guy, let's say America, says, well, we spend $1 trillion in military. We have all these, every form of weapon you can think of, small to big, and so we're safe. And no one can mess with us because we're so big and strong. Now let's look at life from the dictator point of view, or from the enemy point of view. So now you're an enemy of America, and you say, I hate America. I hate Americans believe in the rule of law. I hate the rule of law because I'm a criminal. And I hate, I don't believe in God. I don't have a conscience. I kill people and I don't moralize about it. And how do I defeat America? I can't beat them with kinetic warfare. I don't have those weapons. So what alternative forms of warfare can I nourish and invest in such that if I do a good job, I can compete with America without blowing up America? That's how you get into chemical, biological, and arson. That's how you get involved in cultural warfare. You're fighting with words, propaganda, uh, um, economics. We have to boycott Israel. Legal. We have to take Israel to the International Criminal Court. Demographics. We're going to invade America through the open border of the Biden administration. 20 million or something people poured in, not by coincidence. And cyber. Bad guys can be good at cyber. Um, China, Russia, North Korea, Iran. I'm told are very good at cyber. So, but the enemies in general specialize in non-kinetic war because it's cheaper and it's easier for them to work on because they can't compete with our $1 trillion effort to support our military. And that's how you get involved in what's called asymmetric war. In other words, you send your soldiers, or we, America, send our soldiers with all our weapons, and we think, oh, this is a piece of cake. And then the bad guys uh, jump out of the some cave, uh, jump out of the tunnel they built in the ground, and shoot at your soldiers with just regular bullets and regular rifles, while you have all this sophisticated equipment, and but your soldiers are dead. So that's how you get. So we're really, you could say, in a asymmetric war between good and evil, where we're good at certain weapon systems and they're good at certain other forms of warfare. And one of the theses of my books is that we have to be good at all 7 forms of warfare. You you can't. It's not like a menu at a restaurant where you pick and choose. When you're fighting against bad guys, you have to be good at every single form of warfare. You have to devote the resources and the management to do that. Otherwise, they will attack you wherever you're weak. Now, our number one weakness of the 7 forms of warfare, the number one weakness is cultural war. There is someone in the government, in our government, every democracy, who's responsible for every form of warfare that you can think of, except cultural warfare. In other words, who's our Secretary of Culture? You wouldn't use that name, but you know, and I'm not talking just about the White House spokesperson.
Sure.
I'm talking about someone heading up the protection of Judeo-Christian culture. We don't have that person. Now, the bad guys call that person the minister of propaganda. So I call that person, who doesn't exist, the minister of truth. So one of the big elements of my book is that we need to hire a minister of truth. Again, you wouldn't call him that name. You could call him minister of cultural protection. You could call him minister, or a secretary rather, of Judeo-Christian culture. You could call him secretary for policy coordination. There's many names you can call this person, but he doesn't exist. And therefore, where we usually lose the information war because we don't have anyone managing the information war. Now, by the way, you and me, we're in the scheme of things. Um, we think we're important, but we need bigger and bigger microphones to talk to more and more people. One of the reasons to have a secretary of cultural affairs is they get an instant big microphone, something we can work our whole life to get a microphone that people can hear. A secretary designated by the president to be secretary of cultural protection. Uh, People will listen. You'll have millions and millions of people listening to that person, but we don't have them, and that's why you, me, and hundreds or thousands of you and me are doing what we're doing to fight the cultural war on our own, with the help of some sponsors, but on our own to fill the void left by the non existence of a Secretary of Cultural Protection.
I don't even disagree with what you're saying, but just looking at it for some devil's advocacy, that just in general, that you can see or you can imagine the average just kind of American reflex to that would be absolutely not, right? Minister of truth or minister of culture. But I think in how you're saying it, you would have to I think people would be open to that if you explained exactly what some of these things are. Like this wasn't a random trend. This did originate in Moscow or Beijing or Tehran. And because there are some deleterious things. I mean, why wouldn't you? If I was a foreign nation, why wouldn't you do that? Why wouldn't you try to rip apart, the fabric of the United States in total war? That's exactly what you would do. I'm trying to balance in my head how would that work. I think how it would work is you could have somebody in the DoD, and I don't think for people to not outright reject it, in my own humble opinion, is I don't think they could enforce anything because that seems antithetical to America. So much as they would just have to illuminate and be like, this trend you're seeing on Instagram, this came from this department in China. Now, you couldn't say you're not allowed to share that because that is un-American. But I think if you had someone just illuminating it and being like, hey, that wasn't a random bullet, that was somebody shooting at you. I think that would be very tricky. That would be very delicate. Because at what point do you just become the tyrannical government and say, this is our culture now? But it's food for thought. Yeah, I don't, it would probably have to be something like that. Yeah.
Well, now the irony is we actually have a Secretary of Culture, but he's not called that. If you look at someone, a bigger version of ourselves, take Newt Gingrich or Mark Levin. They are wonderful spokespeople for America. You see them on Fox and other stations, and they're very, very knowledgeable, very experienced, but they're not officially working for the government. And maybe it's better that they're not, because of your point, maybe it's better that they're not officially working for the government, because as soon as they're officially working for the government, people are going to say, and who the hell are you?
Yeah.
I need your advice. Hello. So whereas now, if they just show up on Fox or wherever, people go, "Oh, that's very good insights. I'm glad I heard him." And so the to answer your question is we the people who have the time, energy, and talent to fight cultural wars have to get involved, and that's why you're involved. I'm involved, and a thousand other people that we know or don't know are involved, and Newt Gingrich is involved, and Mark Levin's involved, and together we form the equivalent of the Secretary of Cultural Protection, even though we're not designated by the government with that task.
I think you're right. And I also think that there's something to be said for be the change you want to see in the world or be the proof. And now there are a lot of excuse my French, there are a bunch of shithead commies in our country, but I think a lot of people do look at a figure like Elon Musk or Jeff Bezos or Steve Jobs or whatever, and they can have all their criticisms, but a lot of people do look at that as like that is America. Like you don't have to like it, but that's the entire thing. Is like you can become a zillionaire. Like you can do this. You can build rockets that land themselves. You can build Amazon. You can build, Amazon. Amazon's essentially magic. You poke something on a phone, which really is just a brick in your pocket, and it shows up at your door. I think those are in my personal opinion, those are the best advocates for America. And because they are not government that we know of, they are. listen to more. Now, again, I know that is a big broad stroke because a lot of people do hate them, but there is something to be, you have more vocal people like Elon Musk, and you have less vocal people like Bezos. But I think in general, no, you do kind of have them talking about like this is why you do it here. And their power might be that they're not in I think you're right. I think the power might be that you're not in government because people, rightfully so, when the government comes out saying something, your first thought is like, yeah, that's somehow a lie. I don't know how, but I know it's a lie. It might but I'm drawn to the culture idea. I think it would have to be someone that shows proof that this trend or this meme or this whatever originated from one of these foreign powers, but to remain American, there could be no crackdown on it. There could be no like, you're not allowed to share this meme or you're not allowed to do this TikTok dance because that itself would is antithetical to America. But I think there would be value. And like, because I remember, I think it was in 2018, maybe 2020, but it was later found out that like there was a private Russian citizen who is like funding and coordinating a Blue Lives Matter and a Black Lives Matter protest next to one another. And predictably, it erupted in violence. That is somewhere in Texas, I think. It's not the end of the world. People got arrested, SWAT or riot cops came out. But that alone, I think, would be like that would be worth looking at. Now you couldn't enforce it because if you start to enforce it, that's where you'd have people saying like, "Oh, the people in the government are Black Lives Matter sympathizers, or they are Blue Lives Matter, or whatever." But it would definitely be helpful if you're like, "Hey, these movements for the most part seem to be organic. This guy, I don't know, you'd pull up somebody from FinCEN and be like, this guy made a transaction from Moscow. He's a, whatever, he's a lithium magnet. And he did all of this. Like, you should be aware that there is natural organic friction, but we probably don't hate each other as much as we're led to believe. I think that would be the most important takeaway. I don't know how you would set that up, and that is what I will rest that on your shoulders because you seem to have a better handle on this than I do. But that's a fascinating that is a fascinating idea. If he just pointing, be like, hey, this isn't real. This isn't real, or it is real, but you know where it's from. So yeah, for you, and we're coming up on 45 minutes, so we'll slowly wrap it up. And I'm not even saying it's just a dry fear. Just had a person, so maybe we won't say fear. What is the most pressing combination of the juggling that you see? Like there's all of these threats, but if you were to look at one that needs to be neutralized or focus on, what is the one that kind of seems like it's knocking at the door or has the potential to?
Well, I'm going to give you two answers. The thesis of my book was that you have to do all of the above. Okay, you being the president, if you have 21 challenges, you can't just say, I'm too busy today. I'm going to focus on three of them. No, you're the president of the United States. You have 4 million people working for you. You have 5,000 people designated by you to be part of the administration. You have to allocate the resources to address all 21 fronts at the same time. And so that's one way to answer the question. The second way to answer the question is if pretend the president's on listening and the president says, "Yeah, I'd like to do 21 things at the same time, but humans being humans, what one thing should I focus on right now?" So I would say Iran. I would say Iran is. By the way, Iran does not have nuclear weapons that we know of, as do China and Russia. We're not going to blow up China and Russia, however unhappy we may be about them. Iran, America and Israel just fought a 12-day war with Iran, and President Trump called an end to it in the seventh inning. So I would say let's restart the ball game, and the Iran government has to go. They're the master death cult of the world. I call them Islamo-Nazi death cult. And they're not going to stop until they're stopped, just like in World War II. and America and Israel together, Europe, if they ever get their act together, we have to put an end to the Islamo-Nazi death cult of Iran before it infects and destroys the world.
Not to be totally tone deaf, but that would be a great name for a band. Sure, where are you going tonight? The Islamo-Nazi death cult. Yeah, they're playing at the theater. Um, yeah, it seems to they're almost Russia, China, there seems to be almost a sort of like preemptive attrition. It's like they're massive, we're massive. They're not terrorists in cave, we're not terrorists in caves. We all have nuclear weapons and orbital, and there does seem in an odd way there almost seems to be a bit of a peaceful interaction. Now I understand that the second and third world nation wars are they're not organic. They're funded by the big ones, much like Cold War, be it Korea or Vietnam, or Vietnam, Afghanistan. But there does seem to be almost like a I don't know, a natural cooling that comes from like, oh, they have submarines with nuclear tipped missiles on them. There does seem to be almost a cooling effect of that, and the people that don't have that are paradoxically seemingly more dangerous. That is fascinating. Um, but for right now, Mr. Abramowitz, let's wrap this up. For everybody listening, please go in the description. Please go grab his book, and I will message you after this and when it's going to be up. And there's another show you might want to go on. I'll ask you about. Is there anything I'm missing? Anything that you wanted to hit on that we didn't?
No, I'm very happy with our chat together. Just want to remind people to get my book, The Multi-Front War, and immediately go to the last chapter because that's new, new, new. And secondly, everyone should sign up for my website, savethewest.com. It's complimentary. I do this as a public service. You can get to read my articles every 2 weeks, and you'll learn over time how to save Western civilization. So those are the two takeaways.
Beautiful. Well, dude, I appreciate your time. It's fun shooting the shit with you. You're a cool guy. And
Oh,
I did enjoy that. So I appreciate that very much.
but you called me a cool guy. I always wanted to be super cool.
Okay, you are the super coolest. You're the only Kenneth I know, but you are the super coolest Kenneth I know.
all right. Now I
You'll take it. You'll take it. All right, brother. Well, let's wrap this up. I'll text this to you when it's up tomorrow and all that good stuff and blah, 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 blah. I appreciate your time. And yeah, guys, please go in the description. Please go sign up for his website. Please go grab his book. Even if you don't read it, go grab his book. Go throw him a couple bucks as a thank you for listening to this free interview. So, Kenneth, till next time, brother. Thank you so much for your time.
pleasure to be with you.
Thank you so much. Guys, thank you.